Don't you think that's gonna get worse though? Because
It will.
welcome back, everyone, to yet another episode of Zillennial Money. This is episode 58, the big election post-mortem. So this is pretty much going to be all we're talking about today. And hopefully after today's episode, next week, we can maybe move on to some, non-politics related topics finally. But this is kind of just a big compendium of all our post-election thoughts on what happened, right? So let's jump into it if you guys are ready. So what did happen? Well, as you guys know, the Liberals under Mark Carney won a minority government. And for those people who maybe are from America or maybe are from elsewhere who kind of don't understand the parliamentary system, basically like the country's broken up into different districts called ridings, and each riding has a seat. And you need, in this case, in Canada's case, you need at least 172 seats to grab a majority where you can actually, pass laws and do stuff and survive like no confidence votes without the help of the other party. So the Liberals, unfortunately for them, they maybe it's fortunately for the rest of the country, but unfortunately for them, they did not get a majority. But to say that they got a minority is also maybe somewhat misleading because they have like a high minority. So they only are 4 seats short. And they used to be 3 seats short, by the way. But it was just earlier today, there was a recount in one of the ridings in Quebec where it looked like the Liberals won, but after the recount, it actually flipped back to the Bloc Québécois, who won that riding. So the Liberal minorities down to 4 seats short again of a majority. But, it's only 4 seats, right? Maybe people are saying that they can work with the NDP, who only won 7 seats, but that's enough to, throw them over a majority if the NDP supports the Liberals again. Or, over the course of the next 2 to 4 years, maybe we can get some by-elections in and maybe the Liberals can even crawl their way up to a majority with only 4 seats short. But we'll have to see. But right now, it is a minority. And that's kind of the news. And I try to be like as nonpartisan as possible when I'm presenting the story at first. But if you would excuse me just to be partisan for a second, as you guys, if you guys have been watching this show, you guys probably already know I'm not a big fan of the Liberals. I did not vote for the Liberals. I voted for the Conservatives in this past election. And I endorsed Pierre Poilievre like a long time ago before this election was even called, back when Trudeau was still in charge. But so I was understandably not very happy at the result because to me it does seem like it's a big loss not only for the party that I supported, but in my opinion for the whole country as well. And recently I also just went to the movie theaters to watch the 20th anniversary re-release of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. So this election came at a great time when that, like, after I just watched the movie, and it reminded me of Mark Carney kind of reminded me of Emperor Palpatine, or Chancellor Palpatine as he was known at the time. I think that they even look kind of similar. But anyways, that's just my totally biased opinion. Like, a lot of people disagree with that connection. But if we move on to the popular vote, though, they did win the popular vote, like the Liberals. So there's not much we can complain about there because, yes, like they won the most amount of seats and they also won the most amount of votes, which, by the way, was not the case back in 2021, I believe. So back in 2021, the Conservatives actually won the popular vote compared to any other party, and yet the Liberals won a minority government in 2021 as well. But in this case, it does seem like, it is somewhat fair, I guess you can say. Like, again, people are complaining that the Maritimes have more voting power per person compared to places like Alberta, which is more conservative. But all in all, it's like the Liberals won the popular vote as well, not by a lot, but they won they won the actual parliament, and then they won the popular vote. So it was 43.7% vote share for the Liberals versus 41.3% vote share of the popular vote for the Conservatives. And yeah, we'll talk about the new Democratic Party later, but they won 6.3% of the popular vote, which I believe is the worst showing in terms of popular vote and in terms of seats, I guess, for the NDP in a very long time, right? Like maybe ever. I like, at least in my lifetime, I've never seen the NDP perform worse than this election that just happened. So maybe we'll talk about what's wrong with the NDP later as well. But final note on the election as a whole. This is an interesting note, right? So I always advocate for people to always vote. And again, like people would argue with me saying that, oh, not voting is also a sign of protest to protest the government. And, you know, you guys all suck. It's kind of like the old saying, right? Like, you guys all suck. I'm not voting for anyone. I'm just going to sit out. But, you know, I think that everyone has political opinions to a point, and there are parties where you're never going to find a party that you agree 100% with, but there are parties that you agree a lot with and parties that you agree very little with. So I always encourage people to vote, even if you're not a big fan of any of the parties that are running. And this is kind of the reason why, right? So 608 votes is what stopped 172 seats for the Liberal majority government, which they would have gotten if some of these races had gone the other way, right? Because the NDP won Nunavut, which is like an entire territory, but they vote like, because there's so few people there, there's only one seat in Nunavut, but they only won it, the NDP, by 77 votes over the Liberals. So, you know, if 77 people had you know, just stayed home, then the Liberals would have won Nunavut, and then they would have gotten one more seat. And then in other ridings, you know, the margins were super close for the Conservatives as well. So Conservatives won one riding by 238 votes and another one by 298 votes. So yeah, like, it's just, if these seats had gone a different way, and again, I know there's 4 seats now that the Liberals need because that one flipped back to the block, but like that one was like, you know, I believe the margin of victory initially for the Liberals before the recount was like 20 something votes, right? So it was also like razor edge. That's why it flipped after the recount, right? So again, a few hundred people, less than 1,000 people, is what stopped the Liberals from getting a majority. So I always encourage people to vote, even if you think you live in a safe, you know, riding for X party. I think that elections can always surprise you, right? Like, there are some districts that kind of went a lot differently than what the polls were suggesting. The polls as a whole were correct, but some individual districts kind of went the opposite way of what people were expecting, which we'll actually talk a little bit more in detail right now. Which one of the ridings that didn't go the way that the polls were suggesting was actually the seat of Pierre, the Conservative leader. He lost his seat in the Ottawa region of Carleton. And this was quite shocking because the polls, I was like, you know, browsing 338 Canada, the polls in that riding were suggesting that Pierre was going to win by like a margin of like 10% at least. And he ended up losing by like, you know, not by a lot, but by a couple percent, right? A couple thousand votes. He lost that riding to the Liberals. So now that kind of throws a wrench into the whole thing, because now there's questions of whether Pierre should stay on as Conservative leader, or if he does stay on, he would also have to find his way back into the House of Commons. So usually what happens here is that he would have to convince one of his colleagues in the Conservative Party to resign, hopefully someone that's in like a safer conservative riding, and then he would have to run in that riding through a special by-election, and then that could take up to 6 months. So it could be a while before he's able to get back into the House of Commons, and until then he can't actually even serve as the leader of the opposition, because that has to be a member of parliament, and he's not a member of parliament anymore. And he can still stay as the leader of the Conservative Party, but it's kind of bad for him objectively. There's not really a way to sugarcoat it. So actually, I'm gonna take a break here and pass kind of the question off to you guys. So first of all, what were you guys' kind of experience watching the election? Because I know you guys all stayed up and watched it. Did the election play out kind of to what you were expecting? And that's the first question. And what do you think of this, like Pierre losing his seat kind of thing? Do you think that he should resign, or do you think he should try to stay on? What do you think is the best strategy for the Conservatives moving forward? So, or take it any direction you like, just general comments on the election as a whole.
I watched the election mostly just kind of vibing. I was supposed to be doing some stuff, but I just could not look away. It was so close. I felt like throughout the evening, it was like, even when they called it for the Liberals, I was like, the Conservatives are still picking up seats like mad. Like they were projected at like 150 something, and the Liberals were at that point at like 155, and I was like, huh? Like what? What do you mean the Liberals have already won? Because I felt like it was very much on a razor edge margin on that one. I was surprised. I mean, the polls seemed to be suggesting that there was no snowball's chance in hell that the Conservatives were going to win. But then, as the night was going on, like it was definitely feeling like there was a higher chance than originally expected, I would say. Like, I've really got the feeling that everything the media was kind of suggesting was that the Conservatives were just like cooked. Like they had basically no chance. But then they really were given quite the fight. So I definitely feel like it was relatively on the edge of your seat compared to previous elections. I was not surprised that the Liberals got a minority. I was surprised by how close they are to the majority. And I also was not surprised by the NDP collapsing spectacularly, because I really feel like the coalition they did with the Liberals really soured a lot of people against the NDP, because at that point, like from my perspective, if I wanted to vote for the Liberals, I would have voted for the Liberals. So if you're going to just be the Liberals, well, then I should clearly just vote for the Liberals in that case. If I want, that kind of perspective. So I do feel like that was pretty, I'm sure they got through some stuff that was important, but I really do feel like they really did that at the cost of the entire party being relevant. And at this point, they are basically, I mean, and the funny thing is they still hold the key to power, because they've got those 7 seats that let them tip it into a majority for the Liberals. So they can basically just do exactly what they did last time and swing it to the Liberal side in terms of votes. I was expecting the Conservatives to sneak a few more so that the Liberals had to work with the Bloc to get anything done. But the NDP did, both the Liberal and the NDP both did enough to get it so that they could just lean on each other to get anything done, rather than have to rely on the Bloc to support any bills or anything that they would likely demand concessions to get. So I think and with regards to Pierre, it's definitely a real blow that he lost his seat. I don't know how the party will react to that, because I know they are going to be doing a leadership review. I think that it will be difficult for them to come up with a candidate who is as compelling, I would say, as Pierre, because like I know I've heard some people be like Aaron O'Toole was great and stuff. I literally could not, like, I just he was incredibly boring to me. Andrew Scheer was the exact same thing, incredibly boring. Neither of these people were particularly motivating, I would say, for a conservative leader. Whereas I think Pierre, he was a lot more bombastic, so at least you were aware of him. But I think in that front, he was a lot more polarizing. So I don't know if replacing him would really help the Conservatives that much. I think that might also just be a risky endeavor on that front, because I think that they'll have a hard time convincing the left that whoever they put in isn't just Trump Jr., no matter what they do. Whereas I think Pierre can really lean into some of the branding, such as like his family, etc., that I feel like makes him more appealing from a general Canadian perspective. Like I think that makes him a lot more appealing, you know. Like from my perspective, I know you guys tend to disagree with me on this. I think that the father Pierre is a better look than the fighter Pierre. So I think that having some more of that mixed in to kind of mediumify his aggressiveness, because I feel like people thought he was very aggressive, and they associate the aggressive with the Trump-like behavior. But I think that if he is able to communicate like how that is more so from like a place of caring rather than seeking to, I don't know, divide or something, I'd say that does tend to be a better look for him. But it really, like, I don't know who they would replace him with is the big question. And the problem is that I find the Conservatives have a really hard time finding even moderately compelling leaders. So if they roll up to the next election with a new leader who is about as riveting as a wet paper bag, such as Aaron O'Toole, sorry, Aaron, but I literally didn't hear a single word you said in that election. Literally not even one. So, I mean, maybe he had something good to say, but I literally heard whatever he was advertising, whatever he was putting out there, I never once received any of it. I never saw any reference to what he would or wouldn't do. So I just feel like that's just a sign of being unable to reach the masses and connect with the masses. So I think that I think Pierre is currently their best choice. If they could come up with a alternative who is significantly better, I'm not opposed necessarily to them having a leadership change, but I don't believe that they have a candidate who is better to replace him with. So that's kind of where I'm at on that one.
Here's a thought. Some people are suggesting that Doug Ford could be the one to replace Pierre Poilievre, where we just had an election in Ontario, and Doug Ford won a resounding majority. So that's kind of like the biggest thing. Although I understand provincial politics are different than federal politics, and just for the record, I'm like not a big fan of Doug Ford at all. I think he's terrible, and he's not even a real conservative in my opinion. But it's definitely like part of the perception that Doug Ford is like, at least he's conservative in name, and also he's seen as more of a moderate that like liberals can maybe accept, because like in my opinion he actually is a liberal, but like, you know, he's taking up the conservative flag, but he's actually a liberal underneath, so that might actually pull some liberal supporters to vote for him. And you know, some people are blaming Pierre for being too extreme or too Trump-like or too radical, so maybe putting in Doug Ford is the cure. But what do you guys think of that idea?
I don't think Doug Ford is the cure. I think that Doug Ford is. I've never been particularly impressed with Doug Ford. I think the closest I have been was when he was during COVID, when he was like reasonably reasonable, and I was like, oh, okay, sure, you do that. This is a bit surprising. Whereas some other leaders were a little bit, you know, like I understand being skeptical, but like as a rule of thumb, as a leader, you just should listen to the specialists you hire. Whether or not the specialists you hire are right, you should just follow their suggestions. Or like whether or not that's just what you should do. And I think Doug Ford did a good job of going, well, the specialist said X, I will do X. And I feel like the fact that he did that was surprising. And I honestly feel like that's really the only sign where he was even remotely compelling. Whereas prior to that and post that, it's been like, and I can't speak for recent times because I haven't lived in Ontario for a number of years now. But I can't say I was particularly keen on him when he first came into power. And I gotta say, I've never rolled out of bed and been like, you know what our grocery stores desperately need and our convenience stores? Alcohol. Never once has this popped in my brain, and clearly this was Doug Ford's top priority because that was the first thing he did. And just the fact that that is one of his top priorities was just, it seems like there were other areas that were more important, but alas, I'm not super into him. He's kind of
Just to keep the flow of the conversation going. I mean, I'm not a big fan of him. I've never voted for him. I didn't vote in the Ontario election, this election. I just decided, like, I didn't really understand where my vote could possibly go, where it would be productive. I just honestly, I guess I could have gone New Blue. I mean, I'm in a very strong liberal riding, provincially and federally, so like I don't think it really makes a difference. But I know you're right about like every vote does count because you might be in a riding. I'm not. I'm in red Ottawa. This is a very liberal stronghold, and I'm in a very liberal stronghold part of Ottawa. I mean, Pierre Poilievre, I met him at the airport once, and we had a really good conversation. And then he asked me what riding I was in, and I said Ottawa Vanier, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we're not going to win that." Like he just said that straight up, the leader of the party. Like he's just like, "No, that's liberal riding. That is not a riding that's ever going to be competitive." So that's kind of my situation, like provincially. I think Doug Ford is a doofus. I mean, I think I like the convenience of alcohol at convenience stores or whatever, but it's not a real issue. It's a gimmick, and like in terms of like I can get alcohol anyways. It doesn't change my life that much. in terms of like the like yeah, I mean the guy doesn't even know French. Like he's not suited for a federal party. It's ridiculous. I think Pierre Poilievre actually won more votes than Doug Ford in Ontario. So like I don't really buy into the argument. We're talking about a different election, a different seat count. In terms of the election, my opinion on that, I guess it happened as expected. We all kind of expected the Liberals to win. The media and the polls were calling for a large Liberal majority. So I think that the general pushback that we saw in a lot of like conservative online media was that there was a polling error, and I think they were right that there was a polling error. I think there clearly was, but unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. But in terms of like how the Conservatives did, I mean, like Pierre losing his seats was devastating, but Pierre is running in red Ottawa, and it's fairly impressive that he was able to carry a seat here in 20 years. My understanding is that his riding had a major redistricting, but from Elections Canada. Pierre lives in, it's not technically in Ottawa riding, it's Carleton, which is part of the city of Ottawa, but it's a rural part of the city of Ottawa. But he gets a lot of farmers and people who like are much more rural than like urban Ottawa voting for him. So it is a conservative riding, but half of his riding is now Canada, which has always been a liberal stronghold. So the fact that he lost a seat is unfortunate. It's a bad look. It's not how they wanted the election to go. But as I learned a lot about it, it kind of makes sense that he lost the election, and maybe it's kind of important that parties make sure that their leader is in a safe seat, because you just kind of want your leader to get a seat. And Pierre's going to win a seat in Alberta or Saskatchewan or wherever, rural Ontario, regardless of where. Like, he could have just gone to rural Ontario and he probably would have won a seat. So that's unfortunate, but I think that as long as he stays on as leader, he's probably going to get a seat eventually, and he's probably going to be able to sit in the House of Commons. I don't want to get too deep into it because we're gonna get into it. I can see in the docket, but like, I think he did a very good job because he won the youth vote. I think this is the first time in my entire life where the Conservative won the youth vote. That's very impressive. For the popular vote standpoint, like a lot of the media narrative I've heard in the last about 24 hours has been that Carney won a landslide. Essentially, I mean, they don't use those words specifically, but the tone of the conversation is very much that Carney like one-handedly, and that's just not what happened. I think the country is clearly very divided. It's a minority parliament. The Conservatives picked up way more seats than any other party, and Poilievre won a 41%, which is bigger than the amount that it's bigger than the vote count that Harper won. It's bigger than any vote count any Conservative has won since 1988. It's bigger than the vote count that Jean Chrétien's Liberals won, which was a colossal majority in Canadian history in their first couple of elections, I think. Like, Pierre did well electorally. It just happened to be that the NDP collapsed, and he didn't have a divided left that Harper would have had. And the electoral math just didn't work in his favor. I've highlighted my own opinions, and I don't want to get into it, but like, I highlighted my own criticisms of the Poilievre campaign last week. I just don't think they were bold enough. I am counter to a lot of the narrative that a lot of people are saying online in the media that I believe Pierre should have been more Trump-like. I think Trump showed the world how a populist can win an election, how the populist can defeat media narratives that are very biased. I think the Liberals always have an advantage in terms of having bias in the media to back them. This is always the case. I think the Liberals in every election I've ever seen basically drive every conversation, and the media represents the conversation from Liberal point of view, and Conservatives are typically really bad at driving the conversation. Where I'm disappointed is I actually thought Pierre Poilievre was the best Conservative leader and I'm not a Conservative, and I've said this many times. Like Andy just said that I don't think Doug Ford is a real Conservative. Well, I'm not a real Conservative, so I can't really judge him for that. But I did vote Conservative, and I wanted the Conservatives to win, and I think that Poilievre did better than I've ever seen a Conservative do in my lifetime, and I don't know. I guess the main thing is that I know we're getting deeper into the topics of economics, but 60% of this country went with socialism. They went with the degrowth agenda. Our country is very much proponent of that global progressive agenda, very like European style mentality on government. and the people who chose a different direction. We definitely lost the election. But I will say that I think that Pierre Poilievre came out with a very formidable opposition, more powerful than Harper's opposition in his first election. Harper lost his first election too. There were a lot of calls for his dismissal, and I think that they would have regretted losing him as a leader if they actually went and did that. So I don't think anybody can really carry the Conservative Party that I see. I might be proven wrong one day. My only real worry is that if the NDP do form a majority with the Liberals, if like some NDP candidates were given cabinet seats, I think that we're in for 3 to 4 years of Liberal majority, and I don't know if Pierre Poilievre could survive as leader for a 3 or 4 year period. So I guess we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah, good points. And yeah, I'll second what you were saying, Sunil, where, I really do think that this election was a big resounding, I don't want to say victory, because obviously it wasn't a victory for the Conservatives, but it was a big resounding success, actually, even though that they didn't win the whole thing. But it was a big success for the Conservatives in the sense, like you said, they won the biggest vote share ever, right? Like Harper won a lesser vote share than Pierre, and yet Harper was able to form government. And again, the reason for that is, as you alluded as well, is because the NDP completely collapsed, right? Like imagine if the NDP had a better leader than Jagmeet Singh, if they still had, I don't know, like Jack Layton or someone, if it was Jack Layton in his like prime in 2011 versus Mark Carney versus Pierre, then I think the left would have like split like pretty evenly, and then Pierre would have won a super majority in Parliament, like just with that one change, right? But like the NDP getting 6% of the popular vote, that actually really hurts the Conservatives because NDP voters, they're further to the left than the Liberals even. So like if they're switching parties, if they don't have faith in the NDP anymore, they're going to overwhelmingly flood to the Liberals, and there's going to be, I'm sure there are some people that would vote between the Conservatives and the NDP, but they're in the minority, right? Like the vast majority of NDP voters, I would imagine, would find the Liberals more appealing if they don't want to vote NDP anymore. So that's just an unfortunate fact. And there's no way, like I said, I even said this before the election, that I feel like this is going to be the outcome. I didn't expect the NDP to collapse as much as they did, but I did feel that they were going to get, high single digits, like 8-9% of the popular vote. And that is something that Pierre can't really overcome, because there's nothing he can really say to convince like a big majority of NDP voters to all of a sudden switch to Conservatives. So yeah, that's just kind of a unfortunate fact. So that's kind of my comments to it. Like if it wasn't for Pierre losing his seat, like that's definitely the huge fly in the ointment. If it wasn't for Pierre losing his seat, I would say that it would be an absolute success, like for the Conservatives, and it's still a pretty big success in general, despite Pierre losing his seat. But just anything else, like I can't have imagined that the Conservatives doing like much better than they did, assuming the circumstances. But yeah, Sunil, you raised your hand, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a comment. Like, I think I guess it's a disappointment because the Conservatives were due to win the biggest majority in Canadian history when Trudeau was still the leader of the Liberals. So I guess that's why it ends up becoming a disappointment for a lot of people. But I do agree. Like, I mean, Pierre did better than he should have as a like, and I guess I want to further just make one further comment on like this whole thing about Pierre acting like Trump. Like, he tried his hardest not to be Trump. He like tried his hardest to be like a dad leader instead of mean leader or boss leader or whatever. I forget what Tristan uses words, but he did his best as like the dad version of Poilievre. And guess what? Every single center, left, and left winger still said he was like 60% of the population still thinks he's like Trump. So if 60% of the population is going to say you're like Trump anyways, then just act like Trump. They're gonna call you Trump anyway, so go ahead and act like Trump. That's just that's my view on it.
Yeah, I posted on X that my opinion, which is shared by you, Sunil, but it's kind of unpopular in general, was that Pierre could have actually done better than he already did pretty well, but he could have done better by being more like Trump in certain ways, not being like Trump in all the different all ways of Trump, but if he had analyzed Trump a little bit more and trying to analyze why Trump's kind of bombastic and mean-spirited kind of style actually attracts a lot of people. I think that he could have done a lot better, right? Like you said, Sunil, like doing podcasts, American podcasts, going on like Joe Rogan and just sitting down for like 3 hours and just try to talk like a real human being. Not that like Pierre doesn't, but like he did that Jordan Peterson interview, but I feel like he could have done more and other similar podcasts and stuff, right? Just kind of be maybe a little bit less like professional politician and more of like the grassroots down to earth, because I think that that's a big reason why Trump had so much success, because people view him as bombastic, but they also view him as a more down-to-earth candidate than a typical politician, right? Like that's just my opinion. I know that it might be a popular opinion here, but it might be a very unpopular opinion out on the interwebs. But before we move on, I see that we do have a special guest that joined us, who is not a special guest, who is a regular host, Mr. Dominic, who just decided to join. So I know that this is your favorite topic, talking about Canadian elections. I welcome you back from your long absence. So if you're just joining us, we were just talking about the election in general. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts as well, Dominic, about what you thought of the election. Just general thoughts. Did you watch it? Was this result surprising, or was it kind of what you expected? What did you think of everything that happened? What did you think of Pierre losing his seat? Is kind of what we've been talking about since you joined. So yeah, take it away.
First of all, hello everyone. It's been a while, and I actually had a chance to actually watch the CBC live broadcast on YouTube for the election. I did watch the first half of it, and I was sort of comparing Polymarket because of you guys at the exact same time. At the beginning half of everything, it seemed like it was getting pretty close. I think they were mostly talking about Atlantic Canada, and it seemed like, this specific section was voting Conservative, and then the other was voting Liberal, and then the score was sort of close. And then I did see the odd Bloc Québécois and like NDP vote here and there. I then had to go to practice, and then I was keeping tabs during practice, just like checking on the live broadcast, checking Polymarket. By the way, I break dance, so like that's what I was doing. So I was practicing. 30 minutes later, I take a look at my phone. I look at the broadcast. I'm like, okay, that is a bigger deficit than it was before. And then I look at Polymarket. It goes from like 25 to like 10%, and then like 5% on Pierre's half. And then I knew at that point, I'm like, okay, I think this is it. This is super unfortunate, but it looks like the Conservatives will probably lose this running. And to be frank with you, for like full transparency, I actually did vote Conservative. And then, as you may or may not know, our riding or Newmarket did win the Conservative end, but it didn't look like that mattered at all because the rest of Canada is twisted. Oh, I said it. Okay. But what happened, and I'm a little sad about it. I think a few of us here are, but it is what it is. And to touch on Pierre losing his seat, yeah, I thought that was huge news. It wasn't like a few points, sort of. It was like a lot on the CBC like live broadcasts. Like it seemed like that guy was definitely going to win his seat, and that shocked me quite a bit. I don't know if there's going to be some sort of leadership change, but what can you do? It is what it is, and I just wish things would have happened differently. But we're here now, and we can only make one single vote, and that only has so much power because the rest of Canada has their own opinions too as well. So those are my thoughts.
The points that you brought up is a nice kind of segue into the next section that we were going to talk about. So talk about writings that went blue versus red. I think that everyone's writing here besides Zillennial went conservative. I know, like Zillennial, you said you live in Ottawa, so like, yeah, there was no chance that they were going to go conservative. Like, even if it was still Trudeau, I believe probably your writing would have gone red anyways, even if Trudeau decided to run again, right? So besides that, which is kind of like, you know, an outlier case, I would say, like, I think the writing that Dom, you used to live in, I know you don't live there anymore, but you voted by like a mail-in ballot or something in Aurora, Newmarket, which Aurora is kind of a swing district, and I used to live in Aurora too. I don't live there anymore, but I was looking at the polls for Aurora Newmarket, and it was, according to 338 Canada, it was a likely liberal writing before the election happened. So, you know, according to the polls on 338 Canada, the Liberals were leading there by like a good 5 to 10%. It was like, you know, high single digits or something like that. And then when it turned out, when all the votes were counted, the Conservatives actually won there by like 4%. So the polls were wrong for that writing by like over 10%. It was like a 15% swing, or difference, I should say, according to from the results to the polls. And Aurora Oak Ridges, which Aurora has two ridings. So the south of Aurora is Aurora Oak Ridges, and that riding actually went to the Conservatives by like 10%, which it's kind of shocking how big the margin was, because that riding was also projected by 338 Canada as likely Liberals. So the Liberals were leading by like high single digits there as well, if I remember correctly, according to the polls. But yeah, so I think the story of the night is actually that the 905 region, the 905 area code, which is the GTA, you know, Greater Toronto Area, actually went surprisingly conservative. And that's like one of the reasons why I said earlier that the election result was actually, save for Pierre losing his seat, but besides that, it was actually a resounding success for the Conservatives, because they won big in the 905, which kind of people weren't expecting. And that is actually what made the difference between a Liberal minority and a Liberal majority, right? If the 905 had just gone the way that the polls were projecting, then the Liberals would have won like a pretty big majority, like 180, 190 seats, something like that. But they didn't, and there's a lot of seats in the Greater Toronto Area, right? So that kind of segues into my next story, which is that I found this kind of interesting trend, right? And I'm not sure if I'm just like kind of projecting things or if this is a real thing that is happening. And this happened to an extent in all across the country in the provincial elections too. So if you guys remember, BC also had a provincial election earlier last year. And you'll find that between the provincial elections and also the federal elections, the places with high immigrant populations, I find actually tends to go conservative these days, which is kind of weird, because you think that immigrants are, you know, more liberal, tend to vote more liberal. At least that's been the historic trend. But no, if you look at this writing, Richmond Center, Marpole, which is an area with like high concentration of Asian Canadians, in particular Chinese Canadians, this writing, the Conservatives won, not by like a huge margin, but like by like, I don't know, 5%, which is like not bad, right? And yeah, like that's shocking, because like if you look at the writings around Richmond Center, most of them went red or even NDP, and this is like the greater Vancouver area, by the way. So I can find other examples of this. If you go to the greater Toronto area, Richmond Hill South went blue as well. That's also another area with high Asian Canadian populations. And the writing beside that, Markham Unionville, I believe, is also went conservative. Also very high Asian Canadian populations. And if you're just picking on me because I'm only talking about Chinese Canadians and Asian Canadians, well, there's like also South Asian Canadians, like Indian descendants Canadians in Brampton West, which went conservative. And if you look at the writings beside that, by the time when I took this screenshot, they were still counting the votes. Those writings did actually go to the Liberals in the end. However, the margin was really close. And the fact that you can see I took the screenshot kind of the next morning after the election, and they still couldn't, CBC still couldn't call those districts, shows you how close they were, right? So there's a sizable part of the South Asian community in Canada that are going more conservative. So this is kind of a trend that's happening, I would say, all across Canada. I've shown you examples in BC, and I've shown you examples in Ontario. And if you look at the kind of gains and losses, and again, this is why I think that it's a big success for the Conservatives, actually, because the Conservatives actually gained 23 seats, while the Liberals only gained 6. And actually, I believe they only gained 5 now, because there was that one writing that I talked about earlier where like they did a recount and it flipped back to the block. So yeah, like the Liberals only gained like 5 seats, and the Conservatives made a big seat gain, and the only kind of big losers, I'd say the Bloc Québécois was kind of a loser as well, because they lost a lot of seats. But man, the NDP just getting hammered all over the place. So yeah, that's kind of the second part of this story. What do you guys think of this trend of kind of ethnic minority Canadians voting more conservative now? Like, do you feel like that's a real thing, or is it just kind of a mirage, or like is that actually what's happening? Because I just tend to find that is the case, but I'm not sure if anyone has differing opinions. And maybe if you guys could also speak more on kind of what you thought of whether it was a success, whether you agree, right? Because I think that for the Conservatives, I mean, because the Conservatives did gain a lot of seats. So yeah, thoughts on any of that? Dom, you raised your hand, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I think to a degree, I think people of like immigrant backgrounds lately do tend to swing conservative, and I can sort of explain why. So I think for a lot of Asian people, South Asian people, and you did mention Richmond Hill South, and it looks like kind of Thornhill too, so that the Persian, Jewish, it kind of seems like that area. That's like a very like populous area of Persian and Jewish people. All these people are like the type of people who love to save money and want what's best for their like wallets and sort of the economy. And how we kind of envisioned and saw everything was the Liberal government isn't really doing a good job, so we think that the Conservative government might do a lot better. And so as a result, all these immigrant sort of people who've been living here for a long time, by the way, have decided to vote Conservative. And I think it's just in regards to our current economic situation. Maybe before we would have voted Liberal, but it's just everything's been taken completely out of hand. So I could see as to why in Richmond, that's a very populous Chinese population, specifically of like Hong Kong or Cantonese people. And then Richmond, Markham Hill, also Cantonese and Chinese people too, a little bit of Mandarin. Certain sections of Persian people too, just a little below Yonge and Steeles. Like there's a whole Persian town there. And then in Thornhill, it's a lot of Jewish people. We're all like money drive people and such. And therefore, I think we believe that the conservative governments would have been a better choice just because of their economics and their way of thinking and their mindset and such. And in terms of Brampton, I think South Asian people like to also save money too as well. I think a lot of the big CEOs are in fact South Asian generally. And if you talk to a lot of South Asian people, we like value money highly. So it just goes to the same thing. We love money, we like to save money, and we'd probably like to vote for the person who thinks about money in the best way possible. So I think this is pretty much why.
Yeah, I can get in on that too. Coming from an immigrant background too, my parents came into Canada in the 1970s. Me and my brother were both born in Canada. I think that I think that a lot of what Don said is correct. Like culturally, a lot of immigrants are actually very conservative. We don't really engage historically in like the Canadian culture wars because we want to vote for the party that we think represents our economic interests. And the Liberals have always been the party of immigrants historically, but I think that a lot of immigrant communities have become disaffected with the Liberals and don't really feel appreciated by the Liberals. I can tell you from like an experience, just like being like a Punjabi Canadian. My family comes from India. My background is Punjabi. We feel very disrespected by how the Liberals treated our community in the last 10 years and how we were treated by Jagmeet and the NDP. Like this Khalistani issue, like we don't like this issue following us from like Punjab to Canada. I mean, I didn't experience it in India because I never lived in India, but my parents did. And they people from places like Punjab came to Canada for like prosperity and peace, and they wanted to leave that stuff behind. I can assure you that whether you're Sikh or Hindu, which is a very united community, like we are a united community, and the majority of Sikhs, even in India, and the majority of Sikhs who live in Canada are pro-India and are against Khalistan. India is a democracy. It has a very rich democratic history. Punjab's a democratic province, and like there is no separatist party in Punjab. The Khalistani issue is not an Indian issue anymore. It hasn't been an Indian issue for like decades now. It's a Canadian issue. And we feel like our politicians, including Pierre are playing into that extremist base, and they're representing our community in a very toxic way, which we don't want to be represented that way. And I think that when it comes down to it, like immigrants want to be treated like Canadians. Like we don't want to be treated like when Pierre Poilievre says something like, when you come to this country, be Canadian, we expect you to leave your cultural issue, your national issues from home behind. A lot of immigrants, it resonates with us when we hear things like that. That's why a lot of people came to Canada. Like and a lot of immigrants, like they made a home here. We love this country, and we want our politicians to talk to us like we're Canadian. I don't want you to talk to me like I'm a foreigner, or try to bribe me with foreign issues. I don't want to hear about I don't want to hear politicians also talk about my home country in the way that Canadian politicians talk about my home country, because I'm also proud of my background. And so I just think that when it comes down to it, a lot of the Punjabi community specifically feel very disrespected by how we were treated by this government and how we were like pigeonholed, and like the way that we were like narrated. They narrated our issues in the media, and like places like Brampton went conservative, and there was other Brampton ridings that were like neck and neck. So I think that that says a lot about how our political class talks to us and how our political class engages with us.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And just to add to that, I think that Brampton used to be like a pretty big NDP supporting area, right? And I think that a lot of people were actually like really supportive of Jagmeet at first because he was kind of like the first kind of South Asian leader of a big major federal party, right? And like I think if you go back to and elections that were further back in time, the NDP made gains in Brampton, and then I feel like a lot of people were really disappointed in Jagmeet, and they didn't win a single riding in Ontario in this past election. So yeah, I think that this kind of like pushback to pandering to different ethnic minorities and stuff, it actually does the opposite of what they want, which is it actually definitely turns off a lot of ethnic minorities, which are the people that they were trying to appeal to in the first place, right? So yeah, I definitely can see that. Tristan, did you want to add your thoughts to that?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, having immigrants be more integrated into society and kind of not really necessarily calling out the fact that they immigrated to Canada and just treating them as Canadians. I feel like that's probably a good take anyway, because like at the end of the day, we are all Canadians. My parents are both immigrants also, so we're all Canadian. It seems that oftentimes people want to break out how different immigrants into different groups, and it's like we're all pretty much the same at the end of the day. We're all Canadians, and we should kind of just treat everything as on that front. And that's not to say that we all have the same opinions or the same backgrounds. It's just that at the end of the day, we're all Canadian, and we should be treated as such.
The Liberal Party of Canada is kind of making a lot of the same mistakes that I see that the Democratic Party of the United States is making, where they love to categorize people into boxes. And I'm sure that I think that this is not even like just an issue with the Democrats versus the Liberals specifically. It's like the whole thing with the leftist parties in the West in general, where you can't talk about integration into society because that's seen as xenophobic or racist. But the fact is that like you said, Sunil, like I do think that there is an expectation, and it's not an unreasonable expectation, that immigrants kind of try to integrate to the society that they immigrated to an extent, right? And people are happy to do that, and immigrants are generally happy to do that, but like we shouldn't be afraid to touch that topic of talking about how to integrate immigrants into a society, because that's actually ultimately good for everyone. It's good for the immigrant themselves to be more connected with people that are maybe also immigrants but from a different group and from a different part of the world, and also just to thrive in society. It's more unity is good, right? So I think that in general in the Western countries like Canada and the US, there's been like kind of a bad connotation to talking about integration, because it's like assimilation, right? That's what people say it is. But I think that there should be a level of integration, whether you want to call it assimilation or whatever, but I don't think it's an unreasonable expectation that immigrants should also be treated like normal citizens, right? And in return, there is an expectation that the people who come to a country like Canada respect Canadian values and leave kind of their old conflicts and stuff behind. I think that there's definitely a balance that needs to be struck there. Yeah. Anyways, if nobody else has anything to add on that topic, why don't we move on to the next topic, which is let's talk about another kind of demographic. So we talked about the demographic differences between immigrants and non-immigrants, communities and how they voted. But let's also talk about another kind of big trend that we saw in this election, which is the age demographic difference. Canadians are, as you guys know, complaining about the rising cost of living, and it's obviously justified because the cost of living it has skyrocketed and we have a housing crisis. But there are certain groups that prioritize different issues over the others, or at least a study has found that after this election, that different age groups had put different weighting on the different topics, right? So what do I mean? Well, here's a graph that is ranking the most important factors that in certain age group decided that was most important to them when casting their ballot. So as you can see, I'm not going to go through every single one because it's kind of long. I'll just pick out the ones that kind of stick out to me, where if you notice that dealing with Donald Trump is like overwhelmingly the biggest issue for people age 60 and over, and it's literally like a linear thing, right? Where like the younger you are, the less you care about dealing with Donald Trump. Not that like I'm not saying that young people don't care, but it's pretty clear that the older you get, the more the older somebody is, the more that they cared about dealing with Trump as their number one issue. And then if you look at the issues that resonated with young people the most, the age 18 to 29 demographic, you can see that the biggest issues that they cared about was reducing the cost of living, growing the economy, and making Canada a better place to live. And do you want to take a wild guess as to what the least cared about topic was on this whole chart of people 60 and over? It was making Canada a better place to live. So, I don't want to make it like an us versus them, young versus old kind of thing, but this is just data, right? I'm just presenting the data. And this is what Geiger Capital said, where, the Gen Z Canadians, younger Canadians says, oh, I can't afford food or a house, and our country is being flooded with, millions of foreigners and, unfettered immigration, all that stuff. My nation is being ripped away from me. And Canadian boomers are like, Trump is Hitler. We need to act against him right now, right? So this is kind of just what the data says, and I think that that's kind of an accurate assessment, right? And let me present one more piece of evidence as to kind of this age divide. So Student Vote Canada, which is like an organization that does a kind of a mock election. They get students to like vote, but it doesn't actually count for anything other than data purposes. So this is, I believe this is age or grades like 6 to 12 or something like that. And I believe that this was like 900,000 students across Canada. So it was a lot of students, young people who, maybe they don't have voting rights yet because they're not 18 yet. So they did kind of like a simulation, and they asked people like, if you could vote, who would you vote for? And like, you think that young people are going to be overwhelmingly left leaning, and they're going to like all go for like NDP or Green Party, or at the very least Liberals. But no, like, take a look at the results, right? If the election was held where only elementary school and high school kids could vote, then the Conservatives would have won a minority government with 165 seats, which is actually very similar to how the Liberals did in real life, with only a few seats short of a majority. And sure, like the NDP and the Green Party would have done a lot better than they did in the real election, or at least a much higher kind of popular vote share of only younger people can vote. But I would have expected that number to be even higher, but only 14.5% of the vote share went to the NDP, even when you only have young people voting. So this is kind of a little bit shocking that young people are going conservative these days. So my question to you guys is, what do you guys think of this kind of age divide and these kind of two pieces of data that I just shared with you guys?
Okay, well, I'll take a crack at it. So like, I always try to sympathize with older people, like specifically like 55 and up, because we're gonna end up being like them too. You start to worry about things a lot more. Your like dexterity is a lot worse, and you just worry for a lot of things, and then your navigation skills are a lot worse too as well. We're eventually gonna hit that point. We all get old, And so when you're older, I feel like there's a tendency to worry about a lot more things that don't necessarily need worrying over. So the assumption is Trump in this situation. Well, it's not an assumption, it's probably facts based on the information. But I think us young people have a lot of other things on our minds, living life freely and stuff like that. So it's not as big of a concern. But for a lot of older people, I know they're hitting up that Facebook. They're looking through their Facebook feed. That's their main social media platform. And they see in big bold letters, Trump, something happening like every single week. So inevitably, they're going to be really worried about a lot of different things. And um, a lot of them probably most likely own a cottage house in Florida or something like that. And now they're unable to go because of all these border situations, and people are taking your phone and stuff like that and detaining you. So inevitably, of course, they're going to be worried over Trump. Versus us, we don't have access to those houses. Frankly, like, I even had thoughts of wanting to go to the States. This would be the perfect time, to be honest with you. It's nice and cheap. Like, detainment, sure, it could happen, but at the same time, it's cheap. It's worth the risk. But that's just a testament to the differences in age, so to speak. So yeah, I guess older people tend to worry about a lot of things a lot more, and we're trying to like afford a house and stuff like that, and trying to pave our way in society. So obviously, there's a bit of discrepancies in what we prioritize, and as a result, the chart, you can put that on the B-roll if you want, but that is the result of what's happening today. So I think that's what's behind it all.
I really want to push back on, like the Canadians fear traveling to the United States. Now, I really do think that that's just media fear mongering. Like, and I'll say this with a trip planned to the United States pretty soon, actually. So at the end of May, which is, we're in May 1st, actually, today, at the end of May, and just about a month, less than a month from now, I'll be going to Las Vegas for the Bitcoin conference, right? And I have no plans to cancel that. I have no plans to change any of my itinerary. And I don't fear getting my phone detained and getting like strip searched or whatever. Like, the media, I feel like, has really overplayed those kind of stories. Do those stories happen? I'm not saying that they didn't happen. Like, they of course happened, but has it like exponentially increased where the TSA is just tackling people and pulling down their pants to like strip search them? Like, that's not happening. Like, come on, guys. And I just, in my opinion, that's literally just complete media fear mongering, and it definitely worked to an extent. I feel like it actually influenced the election to an extent, but I don't see any credence to that. And I think that that's just people are gonna not even remember all the media fear mongering about people getting strip searched in a few months from now. That's just my opinion. But yeah, anyone wants to?
I'm so sorry. Just before we continue to the next person, I'll transition it after. Just a few more things. Like, to caveat, I might want to plan to go to Seattle because I'm in Calgary and the flights to Seattle right now are extremely cheap. So I probably will work into that. And this is probably good information for you too, Andy. I had a few friends. A set went to Seattle like a month ago. They were okay. They just went through border, no problems whatsoever. And then another friend of mine went to DC, and he also had no problems whatsoever. So likely we're gonna be all right if we cross over. And another thing, sorry. Just be nice to your elders. Like, you will get old too. I understand that you guys might have conflicting views, but you're going to get to an age where you'll be like them too as well. So please have sympathy. Let them walk slowly, etc., so on and so forth. So just want to preface that too. Okay, transition to the next person.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll address the fear mongering. I think it was a fear mongering campaign. I don't think we were. I think we were robbed from having a national conversation about major issues that were facing Canadians. I am not one of the people who likes to like do this like age thing where we like call like old people assholes all the time. I do really believe in like behavioral economics, where I think that everybody makes decisions based on their incentives that are put right in front of them. I do believe that when old people believe they deserve these benefits they paid into, they do deserve them because they paid for them. Like, I'm not challenging a lot of their positioning, but I am still very disappointed in what happened this week, because like it was very clearly laid out that Carney was going to be a continuation of the Liberals' budget policy. Like, the Carney was actually going to like post bigger budget deficits than Liberals. I mean, if like seniors, I don't think any senior citizens are watching the show, but if any senior citizens are watching the show, like, put in right in the comments, like, did you know that Carney was going to post bigger deficits than Trudeau? Like, did you care that, like, how that would impact people like in our age group? Like, did you care about that, or did you just vote for him because your economic incentives told you that it was good for you and you didn't care that it wasn't good for the rest of the country? So, I mean, that's the only question I ask those people. Like, I understand that people are voting on their economic incentives, but like, what exactly were the economic incentives that you were voting on? Like, or was it just the fear tactics in the media? Like, yeah, I know that Donald Trump played into the 51st state thing, but like, do you really think we're about to be invaded? Like, you really believed it? Like, I think the boomers were very much like the NPCs of this election, the non-player characters, for those people who don't know the gaming lingo. Like, the media told them to vote for the Liberals, so they just went and did it. And that's just like so disappointing to me, because it's like there's just so many issues facing like young Canadians today. People not being able to get jobs, people not being able to get the opportunities that the boomer had. People can't afford housing. People can't afford. There's families that can't afford to feed their families. There's middle class people that are supposed to be middle class that are going to food banks. Like, did you listen to anybody? Did the media present any of these issues? Like, we pay the media in Canada. Our taxpayers subsidize Canadian media. I don't think the Canadian media I think the Canadian media let Carney off the hook on like major issues. They didn't question him on the deficits being bigger than the Liberals. They didn't question it. They didn't give him any tough questions. He wasn't questioned in the debates. He wasn't questioned in any media interviews. There was very little coverage for maybe 48 hours about Carney's deficits. They didn't take him to task over it, and they didn't take him to task. Like, there's a few issues they didn't, but here's another one: the net zero oil production, which I was joking around about in the chat. Like, did the media the Carney said that he would support oil production in Alberta, new projects, if there were net zero carbon projects? Okay, that's like a technology that's probably 20 to 30 years away from being viable technology. Like, did the Canadian media ask Mark Carney if he was going to wait 20, 30 years before he gave the check mark to like new oil projects in the country? Like, did they ask those questions? As a taxpayer who knows of the Canadian media, including the CBC that's fully subsidized by taxpayers, I know that they knew these issues that were facing Canadians. Why didn't they ask Carney these questions? We deserved a national debate in this election on major issues facing Canadians, and we were robbed of that national debate by a media that's subsidized by taxpayers. So all I can ask everybody else and all the viewers is, do you feel satisfied with how your tax dollars were used? Liberals are always lecturing us on how if we don't subsidize the media, we're not going to have a true democracy. Well, did this feel democratic to you? Did the conversation that was presented to Canadians in front of the media, was Carney not taking a task over his massive budgets that he was proposing? Was that democratic? Did we get our money's worth in subsidizing the Canadian media? I don't think so. And I think that has a lot to do with the results we see right here. That people were lied to. People were misled. They were driven into fear, and they voted on fear. And that's the end of it. They thought they were going to get invaded by America. So they voted on fear. And that's what happened. And there's very clear demographics of who's watching cable news, who's reading the Globe and Mails, who's watching the CBC. It's old people. And the results are as presented by the media.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that there's a sense that the results of this election, or this vote in general, was kind of like people made their decisions in haste, right? Or in fear, or just, without thinking deeply about the issues. And I'm not just picking on old people, but I'm saying, the electorate as a whole, I feel like had this kind of like rushed sense where, we got to vote this way and like, tackle this issue right now because there's a fire underneath our asses and stuff like that. But just sit back and take a deep breath and just think about the issues that this nation is facing. And I feel like people will eventually realize, not eventually, I think pretty soon people will realize that Trump did not cause a lot of the issues that we're currently facing, right? Like, of course, I don't appreciate some of the comments that Trump has made about the 51st state and stuff like that, but I don't think that stuff is going to like really be a determining factor to the quality of life in Canada for any like, long-term period of time. What is facing us is this issue that were these issues that face us long before Trump became president, which was, rising costs of living, the healthcare and housing crisis. Like, a third of Canadians can't find a family doctor and all this stuff, right? And like the average median home is like 700, 800K these days. These issues were not caused by Trump, but this election was kind of spun in a way that it was like, vote liberal to stop Trump. And it's like, now we voted liberal, Trump is still president. Guess what? Like, what were people thinking? Like, did people think that if we elected Mark Carney, that Trump would somehow not be the president anymore? Like, I don't know. It just kind of baffles me that we reelected a government that, in my opinion, contributed greatly to a lot of the issues that we're facing. And this is, I say in my opinion, this opinion was actually shared by a vast majority of Canadians if you just go back like 6 months to a year ago. So somehow like something like everything changed within a matter of like 6 months and we love the Liberals again. Like it doesn't make sense to me.
Do you think we got the national conversation we deserved? Do you think the media gave us that?
Of course not, right? And I totally agree with you on the stuff that you said about the media kind of being super biased. And there's a certain demographic, generally older, once again, not trying to, stir the pot, but older people tend to have a lot more trust in traditional media like, CTV News and CBC. And I watch, CTV News and CBC, and I follow their X pages as well. And I read some of their articles, but I at least like I feel like I have a bigger kind of funnel of information that's coming at me that's not official media, and it's like state-run media, as Sunil likes to call it. And I see pretty clear bias, in my opinion, that the CBC and the CTV News of Canada are just trying to kind of push a narrative, and they're biased towards the Liberals in a lot of cases, is what I found.
I think part of it isn't just the fact that the media is may or whether or not the media does or doesn't have bias. I think that Carney intentionally ran this campaign as quickly as humanly possible so that we didn't have time to really dig in and really understand everything about him and what his party was going to be doing, what the platform was. And as a result of that, I think that a lot of people were kind of expecting a different kind of approach than what they actually were going to receive. So, for example, like I think that a lot of people, listen to Carney speak and we're like, oh, this guy's kind of more like a moderate. He's more like he's moving the Liberal Party back towards the right a bit. We're going to get some more fiscal responsibility. We're going to have a country that is, spending its dollars, but that's spending it wisely. It's going to have a lot of benefit coming from this. Whereas I feel like what we actually got from the budget side was a very aggressive spend campaign that basically no one had time to digest before they had to decide whether or not we wanted this man for the next 4 years potentially. So on that front, I think this is a real I think that was like a real contribution to Carney performing so well, is because a lot of people voted in the advanced polling and they didn't really know what they were voting for. You know, I saw lots of posts on like the internet and stuff on like my social media where people were like, oh, this is like a move back towards like, you know, fiscal conservative. If you're a someone who's used the word socially liberal, but fiscally conservative, you should be good with Mark Carney. But then, you know, we actually see what Mark Carney puts out there, and it's not what I would describe as a fiscally conservative, socially liberal platform. It was a socially liberal and a fiscally liberal platform of spend. Money grows on money printers. So it's just like, when it really came down to it, I think that because of the way that it was set up as the election, it was done in such a fashion that we had this new person who's everyone's saying is different than the old person. And I think a lot of people didn't know that he wasn't as different as they thought until after they had already voted and they could no longer make any real decisions. And on that front, like, I think that you could make this a similar-ish criticism on Pierre with their platform also coming out after the majority of the advanced voting was closed, or like towards the end of the advanced voting. But at least Pierre, we had a number of years to kind of understand more so what his character was like, more so what kind of things were his priority, more so what like sorts of issues were what he was saying. And whether or not you liked his platform or didn't like his platform, you at least had a sense of who he was. Whereas I feel like Carney we didn't really have the time to really dig into what this person and what he represented. We did not. He literally came out of nowhere from like a lot of perspectives, including mine. Like I feel like this man appeared and suddenly he was in charge of the country, and then suddenly he is now voted for being in charge of the country, and I'm like, who is Mark Carney? Why do I care about him? For two, like, should I trust him? You know, he hasn't been representing anyone for a number of years, like yet or ever. He was an appointed role with the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. So these are not things that inspire like a widespread country is approving of this individual. It speaks more to what bureaucrats are approving of this individual. And that's not necessarily something that I am particularly into. So it's just, it really felt like there was a clear priority to speed run this. And I think part of that is also like the media was kind of, I feel like, reacting to news. And I think that they often are, they're definitely left leaning, the majority of the ones in Canada. And they just were not able to keep up, I think, with the speed of which this election went. And as a result, I feel like their bias was much more apparent than I think it is at other times, because they just were outputting stuff, I think, faster than they maybe would have liked. And it's not like, and on that front, I think the criticism of them being left biased is fair, because, like, you know, they were often doing a lot of fear mongering regarding the US, etc. And I think, which I think from my perspective, you know, it's fair to be concerned about the situation with the US. And I think that the news should be concerned about the situation with the US. But because we had this election going on at such a breakneck pace, the fact that they were so focused on it, I think really pushed people towards the sitting government. And how the sitting government had responded, particularly since there wasn't a lot of differentiation between the two parties on that topic in particular. And then
let me just kind of respond to some of what you said as you gather your thoughts. Yeah, with regards to like the media stuff, like I always just ask myself this one question, right? Like if this thing that happened, whatever it is, good or bad, if it had happened to the other person, like the opponent or whatever. So let's say if it's something bad that happened to that came out about Carney, if the same thing, if Pierre Poilievre did the same thing, would the media be like more accommodative or more aggressive in going after Pierre, right? So for example, like with the kind of Brookfield kind of stuff where it came out that Carney, he was advocating for relocating the headquarters of Brookfield to the United States when he was pushing like a very anti kind of American message. You know, it's kind of contradictory, right? Or when Carney said one thing in English to Albertans about building pipelines, and he said another thing in French to Quebecers about not building pipelines in Quebec, or when he, you know, just refused to fully disclose all of his assets that he had in some like holding company that was in Bermuda or Cayman Islands, I can't remember. Like all this stuff, I feel like if Pierre did the same thing, the media would never stop talking about it, right? Like the media would have dragged Pierre through the mud if it turned out that like Pierre had like a massive portfolio that was hidden in Bermuda or something like that. So I implore people to be just intellectually honest, right? Like this is how you can really just try to be a centrist. I know it's hard and everybody has partisan and bias and stuff, but just keep on asking yourself these questions. And it could be something good, right? Like if Pierre like had some, you know, great like news that came out about him that he like, you know, I don't know, saved a puppy from a fire, from a house fire or something, like how long would that be covered in the media versus if Carney did the same thing, right? Like, yeah, it's just, I think that people should be more intellectually honest when looking at the media, because I do feel like the media is biased. And if you're not intellectually honest, if you approach it with like even the slightest bit of bias, then it's going to kind of swing you towards the narrative that the media is trying to push a lot more easily. And last thing that I'll add about your comment, Tristan, about how like Carney kind of came out of nowhere. I know people are going to call me a conspiracy theorist for this, but I don't care. I'm going to say it anyways. This is what you call a globalist plant, right? Carney is the definition of a globalist plant. And I know people are like, oh, you're pushing conspiracy theories. You're like bring up the Illuminati stuff again. But like listen, like just ask yourself, if you're a Canadian, did you know that Mark Carney existed as a human being a year ago? And I think like 90% of people that like 90% of Canadians would say no, they didn't even know who he was a year ago, right? And now all of a sudden he's the prime minister. So just saying, right? Sunil, you raised your hand.
I just wanted one point is that like the Liberals have been lecturing Canadians that like they want to fund the media to like save democracy for the last 10 years. We're funding the CBC for many years. We fund the CBC as taxpayers. And now we fund Bell Media, we're funding Rogers, we're funding all the big media companies to put out news for local news and to save democracy and to make sure Canadians have access to information. But if the only information we have access to is information that favors one political party over all others, then like it's not appropriate for Canadians to be funding things like the CBC and to be funding any media, because the media is clearly biased. And I think media should be allowed to be biased. Actually, in a true democracy, media should be allowed to be biased. They have nobody has any right to tell the media what bias they're allowed to have. But if the taxpayers are funding the media, which we are, then we have a right to tell them not to be biased.
Yeah, good points. Good points. Does anyone else? Tristan, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, so this is back to I remember what I was going to say earlier, which was regards to like going to the States, etc. I think that realistically, it's unlikely that you're actually going to have any problems going to the US. I'm sure that there are instances where people have had problems. I don't think that that's the majority of people's experiences, but I think it's fair enough to be concerned about that. But on that front, I think personally, I will be choosing not to go to the US a lot because I take the perspective of I'm displeased with the tariffs that have been placed on Canadian goods. And on that front, I would like to just vote with my dollars, you know? Like if the Trump administration wants to put tariffs on things, I will choose not to spend my money in the US for the time being. If they remove those, then it wouldn't take much convincing for me to go and spend those dollars back in the US. And from my perspective, I think one of the main things that you can do to express displeasure with a country or a company or anything like that is to vote with your dollars, because they might not listen to your words, but they will notice it on their bottom lines, and that will bring attention to it. So personally, I will be choosing not to spend as much money in the US as I have in the past, in the hopes that as part of the overall movement of doing such a thing, that there will be sufficient pushback from Americans on this loss of revenue that convinces the government to quit messing around with the tariffs with Canada for a bit. But we'll see how it pans out. But that's just kind of my perspective on it. Like, if you don't like something, don't give them your money, is kind of my perspective, you know. And that's I think a pretty good way to protest something without going out there with a sign and doing nothing.
You know what? Like, what you're saying is totally fair, but I'm just gonna say my opinion. Like, what's stopping me from shopping in the United States is not because I want to protest Trump, is because our dollar is just now garbage compared to the US dollar. Like, that's the biggest thing that stops me, right? And like, I find that the Canadian dollar is it's correlated with oil prices, and oil prices are now down a lot. And also, if Mark Carney is gonna not build pipelines, which it looks like he's not going to, even though he says he's going to, but I really doubt it, because he's like still pushing the net zero narrative and all this stuff. Yeah, I without the kind of oil revenue and, you know, without the natural resource sector ramping up in Canada, I don't expect the Canadian dollar to, you know, rise back to the American dollar like anywhere near parity, because at one point it was actually at parity in like 2009, 2010, something like that, during the great financial crisis. But I don't expect the Canadian dollar to really do that well going forward if we're not gonna, you know, unlock our natural resource industry. But yeah, anyone else have anything you want to add? Dom, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, sure. I was just gonna say to Tristan, I don't think the governor of California is gonna like that one, eh? Have you guys seen those commercials? He's trying to promote Canadians to come over to California. It doesn't look like it's working too well, but I've seen those commercials here and there, so just mention that too as well.
I'm actually going to California next month.
Yeah, I don't like Gavin Newsom, but I would totally go to California. It is one of the greatest places on earth. Gotta hand it to him.
Yeah, Disneyland is great. I agree. Yeah, we all
go to
don't
California.
care.
I go to California all the time. It's awesome. I would go if I go anyways, but like I actually don't have a choice. Like I have family that lives in the U.S. I want to visit them. They live in California. I'm gonna go. But honestly, I probably would still go if I didn't have family there. I mean, I still like eating like clementines. I'm not gonna buy. I can't buy a Canadian clementine. I'll buy Spanish ones, I guess. Fine, whatever. I don't care. I mean, it's just, but like if Canada wants me to buy Canadian goods, they can make the Canadian economy a little bit more competitive, so we don't get like crushed by Canadian conglomerates that just get protected by our government to charge us more expensive prices.
Are there such things as Canadian clementines? Like, or they're growing in greenhouse or what?
No, there's no Canadian clementines. They're like the only thing you can really get are Canadian or things that grow.
No, but
I guess you can get strawberries in greenhouses.
Yeah, there's
They cost like $9 or something.
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, there are strawberries that are grown in greenhouses in Canada, and people were like, during the height of the pushback against America during the campaign season, people were like, "Oh, buy Canadian," and like, literally, somebody took a photo of the strawberry counter at their local grocery store, and I forget the exact price, but like, the American ones were like $4 for a box, and the Canadian ones were like double the price. It was like $9.90. It was like $10 for the around the same. And the Canadian ones are like smaller, or I guess they're by weight, so I guess it's kind of the same thing. But like, it just seems like the greenhouse ones they're grown in greenhouses, right? Because it was also during winter, so there's no way you can grow strawberries in a Canadian winter. So yeah, I just don't think that like this whole like pushback against American goods is really gonna last, especially now that the election is over. People are gonna magically start forgetting about buying Canadian again, like we always do, because at the end of the day, I understand the argument from you, Tristan, about voting with our dollar, but voting with our dollar also means that we need to like keep more of our dollars to vote in the first place, and the best way to do that is to not like bankrupt yourself at the grocery store. And sometimes if the American or just any imported good is much lower than the Canadian one, I think that the vast majority of people are going to go for the cheaper priced one, cheaper priced product versus one that's made in Canada.
To be clear, I did not say that you had to only buy Canadian. Just don't buy American. I'm just saying.
But what if the American one's cheaper, right? Like
Is it? Because in my experience, typically the American ones have been, either basically the same, or or it's something specific like clementines where we literally can't get it from somewhere else. So like,
I mean, just to give it a little tips on clementines, you can buy Spanish clementines. They're pretty damn good. You can buy Mexican fruit too.
Yeah, Mexico's got a lot of fruits at our stores as well. So like, we don't really. It's actually not that hard to avoid American goods. They're almost the vast majority of stuff that comes from the States to Canada. There is also someone else who provides the goods to Canada for the vast majority of the goods. Not everything, but like there's definitely like a lot of Canadian alternatives or other countries' alternatives. And when I say vote with my dollars, I'm not saying that you have to buy just Canadian. You can buy whoever you want. Just from my perspective, since I disagree with the tariffs on the U.S., I will be choosing to buy less U.S. stuff. Just for now, I have no problem with buying U.S. stuff. I'll happily buy it if the tariff situation gets figured out. It's just I think that a great way to communicate to the leadership over there that this is not a good long-term strategy is to showcase it in terms of GDP lost rather than in terms of people complaining. So I think that I think basically everyone respond well. I think most people respond better to that. Most governments respond better than, particularly this American government, I think would respond much more to a business threat than to anyone standing around with a sign going, "Oh, we'll get those American clementines out of our store." You want to communicate your dissatisfaction with that situation, just don't buy American stuff. It's fine. And I mean, if you want to buy American stuff, I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to complain about you. I'm just telling you what I will choose to do. I also don't do all of the grocery shopping, so you know, I'm maybe I'm buying American stuff and I'm not even realizing it. So I just when I am participating at is what I consider. But if I really want something American, I'm probably not gonna stop myself necessarily. It's just that if there's two options, an American one and another country's one, Canadian or otherwise, I will be more likely to purchase the item that is not American as a result of this assessment. For now,
I think the voting with your wallet is actually a legitimate way of. I was just joking around. I actually have been buying Spanish clementines. They're great, actually.
On that note, let's move on to the next story for the sake of time. I do have to try those Spanish clementines sometime later. But yeah, anyways, so the next topic, talking about stuff that divides us, let's talk about the election results and what it means for Canadians going forward. So yeah, basically, like this, I know this section is going to seem partisan, and I'm sure every episode at some point somebody is going to be, maybe a liberal supporter, maybe they're like just, a leftist in general who just call us conservative hacks or partisan hacks or whatever. And I can't convince anyone to like agree with my opinion if they don't agree, but I'm just trying to present facts, right? And I'm not saying that you should vote for this particular party or else we're all doomed. And I'm not trying to make that argument, but I'm just trying to show you guys just taking Pierre Poilievre or taking the conservative out of the equation. If we just look at the performance of the past 10 years of the Liberal government, they don't have a very good track record, right? Like, can we all just agree on that? And again, I'm not trying to say that you should go out there and vote conservative or anything like that, or try to, launch an insurrection and take down the government or anything like that. I'm just literally presenting you a list of facts of what has already happened. And you can make your assessment as to whether I'm being fair or not. Okay, so here we go. Here's a list of the quote-unquote accomplishments or negative accomplishments of the Liberal government over the past 10 years. And again, I'm sure not everyone would agree with every single point here, but I think that most of us can probably agree with most of the points that are on here. Okay, so I'm going to just read them out. So worst housing affordability ever, skyrocketing national debt, rampant inflation, homelessness in tent cities, violent crimes soaring, opioid deaths on the rise, healthcare system breaking down, bank account freezes during the protests of the trucker convoy, ethics scandals, talking about like the weed charity and the SNC-Lavalin stuff with Trudeau, censorship of citizens, food bank use at record highs, excessive government spending, 25-year high interest rates, and reckless immigration policy. And on the reckless immigration policy, I think that does resonate with a lot of Canadians, more so these days, right? Where even the mainstream media were saying that what Trudeau did was really bad in terms of the immigration policy because it wrecked our national consensus on immigration. So Canadians used to have what's called the national consensus, which is immigration is good, and then we should generally be more welcoming of immigration, and that's been the consensus in Canada for decades and decades. And now there's a lot more, and I know a lot of people still support that viewpoint, but now there's a lot more debate, right? Whether we're letting in too many immigrants too fast. And this is also another post from Geiger Capital that pointed this out, where Canada imported around 5 million immigrants in the past decade from 2014 to 2024, and that resulted in a 15% increase in the population. And per capita, that's where it really hits you, where you might be growing your GDP as a whole, but if you let in a bunch of immigrants to at a point where the society can't absorb the extra impacts, well, your per capita GDP is going to drop. And it's hard to imagine any government failing more than the Liberals have, and yet Canadians have just elected them again. So this is a chart of just the big countries. I think they're like OECD countries or something like that, where it's just like the major developed economies of the world, where Canada's just the worst on the list out of this whole list, at only 0.5% GDP per capita growth. This is illustrated. This is a kind of like maybe not the most up-to-date chart, but it illustrates the kind of the problem in a graphical form, where if you plot the real GDP per capita of the US versus Canada, you can see that Canada was increasing with the United States neck and neck, almost a perfect correlation up until 2015. And guess what happened in 2015? It was the Trudeau Liberal government who got elected. And then look what happened since 2015, where our GDP per capita is now back down to where it was when Trudeau took office. So literally it's a lost decade for Canada in terms of GDP per capita. So I'm sorry that this section is kind of bleak and is kind of doom and gloom. But I'm just gonna toss a question to you guys. What do you guys think of, the fact that we elected another Liberal government, and where do you see things going from here for Canada? Are things gonna get better? Like, are you gonna, give me some hope here, or are we all just doomed? So,
I'll take a crack at it again. So I think for me, simply, the reason as to why I voted Conservative specifically is because of the former track history, right? There's a lot of imperfections in our former government or current government, unfortunately now. I mean, anyway, I'm too truthful here, but yeah, point being is there's a track record of a lot of things that weren't so good for us Canadians and our society and economy. And that's the reason as to why I voted Conservative, because even if there is a leadership change, that leader probably is more likely to agree with some of the former policies than the opposition. So therefore, I think the opposition would be better, because the last 10 years kind of sucked in a lot of ways. So for a lot of Canadians, this list is the reality. And as unfortunate as it is, it might still be a continuing factor. We'll see. I don't know if there's going to be an election in like a year or like 4 years, but we'll just have to wait and see in this Liberal government, and then from there we'll see sort of the true colors of Carney's government, and that is what it is, because we couldn't get what we really wanted. But yeah, that's all I say.
Yeah, I guess I'll take a crack at it. The situation is not good, because I just don't think that the Liberals are. I don't see the Liberals like even talking about a lot of the issues that you pointed out on their track record. Like, there's no conversation in Canadian politics about the opioid crisis, which I see like outside my front door. I can go out the window right now. I can see opioid addicts on the street trying to collect money. It's really, really grim in my neighborhood, actually. I've never heard a Liberal politician speak on this issue in a while. I don't think that I haven't seen a lot of segments in the CBC talking about the issue. I don't know what the game plan is on Canada's productivity. They said that he said that he's gonna support pipelines and oil projects that are net zero. I know that's a lie. I know that carbon capture technology is not real. I mean, it's like it can be done in a laboratory, but it has never been done in real life. I don't know what Canada is going to do. We have to focus on a resource sector. We have to be more competitive. There's clearly signs that our GDP per capita is like trailing the United States. Like this country cannot function properly. Like, we can't pay for our social services. We can't do stuff unless we grow our productivity. And like a lot of the social services the Liberals have given us in the last few years are things that could probably be addressed by people's disposable income if they weren't taxed so high. So we're being taxed high. We're getting our social services are eroding. I don't think the Liberals are going to change course on major issues like immigration. I don't think they're going to change course on major issues like pipelines and productivity. I don't think they're going to lower taxes on business. So I don't have high expectations. I don't know what else to say. Like my viewpoint is very negative. I don't want to be negative. I like being optimistic about things if I can. I like to find something optimistic. I guess the only optimistic thing I can say is that you don't need the government to save you. You can save yourself. There's options available for people. There are going to probably be job markets in Canada that are better than others. So I would recommend, like, you can move around. Don't be too scared to move around. But beyond that, all I can really say is, this is not financial advice, but you should be looking into buying risk assets that can help you outpace the cost the Canadians are going to face as a result of these high deficit policies and the cost of inflation. So it's not financial advice, but I'm going to continue to stack Bitcoin because this is the Bitcoiner podcast, and I think it's important to share that information. I did an analysis with Grok today, and I decided to say, like, if a Canadian was to put $500 or $1,000 per month towards Bitcoin for 5 years starting in 2019, what would they end up with today? The number would be somewhere close to 300,000-400,000. I'm not saying that as like you're gonna get rich off of Bitcoin. I'm just saying, like, don't spend your money on, the government isn't gonna go through an austerity program. So what you can do to protect yourself is to have austerity yourself. Save your money. Don't spend it on stupid consumer goods and buy Bitcoin. That's all I can really. That's the only thing I'm gonna be doing, and I think that everybody should be doing that.
Gotta find that meme and like put it in. It's like, that old guy is like, call an ambulance, but not for me. Like, I like switched up that meme, and it's like, a Great Depression is coming, but not for me. And then he's like, laser eyes Bitcoin maxi. Yeah, that's how I feel that the future of Canada is gonna be. Where I think that all these programs that the Liberals are proposing that involve, high spending and stuff, they're obviously going to sell it as fighting for the little guy, where we're going to give you dental care, we're going to give you cheap child care, we're going to give you, just all these, like, jack up your pensions and make sure that our seniors are taken care of. And I'm not saying that those things aren't important. Obviously, they are important, but you can't get around the fact, like, we should separate kind of the moral part of like what we should do to help people with just like the raw numbers and the fiscal side, where it's actually gonna, like, if you blow up the fiscal side of things, and eventually it's gonna lead to, a financial crisis, a disaster that's gonna be not good for anyone, right, down the line. So I just feel like, they're trying to sell this as like helping the little guy, but in the end, all this excessive spending, the money is going to find its way into assets, right? Whether it's risk assets or just even, real estate and stuff like that, which is going to get even more expensive. And that actually widens the wealth gap, which is the opposite of what they claim they're trying to do, which is to make things more fair and to reduce the wealth gap. But when you blow up the asset prices through excessive government spending, that's actually super good for people who have assets, and that's actually going to make the rich richer in the end, which is the opposite of what they say they want to achieve. Sunil, you raised your hand.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one more thing. Like, my biggest fear at this point is I think that there's like a group of Canadians. There's an age that I don't know what that age is, but there's an age that exists that where people might have to get ready for a future where we don't have the things we, like, the Canadians love. We might not have a pension plan. We might not have public health care, because I don't understand how a country that has 10 years of lost productivity and doubles down on these policies for potentially 4 more years, like, I don't understand how we're going to pay for these things. It doesn't make, like, the math doesn't work out anymore. Like, I want to have a public pension plan. I want to have public health care. I don't know if certain Canadians, I think that we have to be prepared for these things to go away. because, and I'm not advocating those policies. I just don't know if we're going to be able to afford those things in 20 years because our government is not taking its spending seriously, and no level of government is taking its spending seriously in Canada. It's not just a federal thing, but it's especially a federal government problem.
Yeah, and you know what? Today I was just browsing X, and Mark Carney actually made an announcement today that starting today, the dental care plan is going to expand from people age 65 and above to people age 55 and above. And it's already available for children under 12, and it's already available for anyone that's on disability, regardless of their age. And then he also said in coming weeks, it's going to be available for everyone, right? 18 to 55 as well. So again, like I feel like people are afraid to criticize this online, and conservatives are afraid to criticize this because it definitely does seem like if you criticize this that you hate people and you want Canadians to have bad teeth, or like that's just how, of course, like the liberals will spin it if you even try to criticize it. But the fact is, again, we have to kind of separate the fiscal side of things and the moral side of things, right? Like I agree with people that we should have good dental care, right? Like dental care is important, and that's like, and if you have good teeth, that prevents a lot of, you know, other illnesses that you might contract down the line, and it's kind of like an investment. Like I really get it. People think I don't, but I do. I get it, but it's just, you know, the cost that it's gonna, like, people don't recognize how much the overspending is the problem that drives inflation, which has been the number one complaint of Canadians for the past like 4 to 5 years. And actually, even before COVID, and I know people are going to blame COVID, but even before COVID, inflation was an issue, right? Like people kind of just selectively forgot about that because COVID was just such a big event that blew up inflation even more. But if you even look at like between 2015 and 2019, how much the cost of things that people actually want to buy, like, you know, post-secondary tuition or, you know, just housing prices or stuff like that, like that stuff was going up like a lot more than the stated CPI as well, even before COVID hit, right? So I'm just, like you said, Sunil, I'm afraid that there's going to be a point in time where, you know, everything is just going to kind of catastrophically collapse. Like people are not going to be able to get their pensions because we'd run out of money. People are not going to have dental care at all if this like kind of fiscal side of things blows up. And there's going to be problem, not even dental care, like there's going to be problem with our universal healthcare system if we don't take care of the fiscal side of things, right? And I just think that what Carney is doing is really dangerous, and it's really aggressive for sure, but it is also very dangerous where it seems like he wants to spend like all the money in one last party and then worry about picking up the bill later, right? Like I use this analogy. It's like if you go to a steakhouse and you order, like if you go to an expensive steakhouse and you order like kind of everything off the menu, you put everything on the Amex, your quality of life is going to be very, very good. And you're going to have a really good time in the short term. And everybody is going to praise you because, like, let's say you're buying food for everyone, not just yourself. Like, everyone's going to praise you. You're the best. We're having such a good time. And then when it comes times to pay the bill, everyone leaves and you're stuck with the bill and you don't have enough money. So what do? Right? So this is kind of what I feel like Carney is doing, is that right now we're at the steakhouse and and he just like he wants to spend money because he just won a big victory in the election, and I'm just afraid of that day when we have to pick up the bill.
Yeah, I think that Carney is definitely gearing up to do some big spending. So I think that your perception of him being kind of wanting to throw a party is pretty accurate. I think that I find it hard to believe that someone could inflate, like run such a large deficit and not cause significant inflation. And that's kind of the big problem with Carney's kind of plan, is that I just don't see how he's going to do it without causing significant inflation. And if there's significant inflation, all that happens is that everyone who's got assets gets richer. Everyone who doesn't have assets, aka the majority of the people, gets poorer. So it's just it's a tough spot. I don't think that I'm feeling particularly optimistic, but at the same time, I'm also kind of like, we're kind of in the same situation of everyone who is kind of screwed, which is a lot of countries are currently kind of screwed, and they're not getting better, they're getting worse. And I feel like there is solace in this collection of countries that are all equally getting bad. Maybe not equally, but like, you know. So, and maybe if that happens, maybe the world reorg will be more gentle, because there is more countries being affected, or maybe it'll be much worse because there's more countries being affected. So it's hard to predict how it's going to play out. I think that I think I can understand why a lot of young people would be pretty jaded by our current situation, because we're not heading in a direction that's going to assist them with becoming better off. And I think that's really the problem. It's like, you know, your future as a young person in Canada, it's not particularly bright. And just that fact alone will incentivize a lot of people to make new decisions, different decisions than will be in the best interest of themselves or Canada necessarily, right? So if we and this is, I think, a large contributing factor for Canadians moving out of Canada to go work somewhere where they can make more money, often the US. So if we just continue having all this brain drain to the US, we're having brain drain, and now we're having we're just completely inefficient with our economy. We're not really heading in a good direction. And we're not utilizing the ways that we can be better off, such as the capital of the human capital that we generate, because Canadian education institutes, for all their flaws, they generate some very, very top-notch educated individuals. So, like, for example, like the University of Waterloo or U of T, both of those schools generate like very good engineers and computer scientists, etc., who then immediately leave the country to go to the US to go work for an American company, because there's basically no reason to work for a Canadian company, because you can make twice as much money for a US company. So we need to find a way to resolve stuff like that if we ever want to be better off in the long run. But I don't think that the Carney Liberals necessarily have got that kind of perspective. I think they're more so they're the kind of people to slap a band-aid on an injury, you know, give you your $10 childcare instead of ensuring that, you know, we live in an economy where a single family income can cover the cost of or a single income can cover the cost of a family, right? You know, clearly the solution isn't to raise incomes sufficiently that one income can support a family, and instead to just make it cheaper for someone else to raise your children. You know, it just makes sense. It's just pure logical. But yeah, that's kind of my perspective.
Yeah, and I think you illustrated the problem pretty nicely, where The only thing I'll push back against is when you said that we're all kind of taking solace in the same problem because a lot of countries are going through the same thing. I actually think the problem is that the problem facing Canada specifically is that we have a much worse problem compared to other countries. And part of the reason is because of what you said as well, Tristan. We have this huge brain drain problem, right? So we both went to the University of Waterloo, so you would know this. If you were to, take 10 engineering students and you give them like, either a co-op or a full-time opportunity even between Canada and the United States, I guarantee you that like at least 9 out of 10 would choose the United States, and most likely 10 out of 10 would choose to go to the United States, because it's just like, it's literally you get double the pay or even more in the US compared to Canada. So like all this like kind of anti-American sentiment in the media, that's not going to change that like simple fact, right? That people would vote and would act in their own financial interest, despite like, just because that's just an economic force, right? Despite the kind of sense of patriotism that the Liberals are trying to instill in us. Is like, oh, America sucks, stay in Canada. It's like, well, you can't just say America sucks, stay in Canada. You gotta actually put through some results, right? And the same thing that's happening with like our engineering side is also happening with our doctors, where a lot of doctors are moving to the States because they can just make more money and get taxed less. And there's no amount of like pushing patriotism through the media that can really make a dent in that factor, right? Like, people are not going to the United States because they hate Canada and they love America. It's just America pays them more, right? Like, what are you going to do about that? And I feel like a lot of the liberal policies, they're all focused, as you said, on just dividing the pie into into smaller pieces and arguing who got a bigger share of the pie than they should have, versus what the strategy should be, which is, again, it's more on the conservative side, in my opinion, which is trying to figure out ways to grow the pie as a whole and worry less about who got an unfairly large portion of the pie. So I just think that there's two kind of competing thoughts on this, where, yeah, like, I totally agree with you. Like, if you just tax people less and people made more, then maybe people could just get their own private dental insurance, and then they wouldn't have to do this plan of like this national dental plan. And if people just made more, then they can afford childcare. They don't need the government to step in and subsidize and be like, we'll give you the $10 per day childcare, right? So yeah, that's just my thoughts. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything they wanted to add.
That combination to be anti-American and anti-success within Canada, because like you have to you can't like resent your successful population and like push those people into the United States by taxing the hell out of them and then resent America. So like, all I can say is if somebody like finds an opportunity in the US because they get paid more, power to them, and you should do that. And if you're a young graduate who has an opportunity to go to the US and you're just frustrated with your job search in Canada, don't feel bad about it. Just go. Just take care of yourself.
Yeah, and this is like kind of the problem that the Liberal government under Trudeau never understood, and I don't think the Carney Liberals are understanding either, that it's just economics, right? People are gonna do the thing that helps them financially the most, and for that reason, I actually think that Canada's at risk of stagflation. So stagflation is when your GDP doesn't grow, but also you have inflation, right? So how do you get the GDP to not grow? Well, you push out people to the United States, right? Like, you push out all your high-skilled, high-salary engineers and doctors to the US by implementing, these high taxes and anti-business practices. And then you also get high inflation by excessive government spending through all these, giant programs that are, sometimes you could argue that maybe it does help a lot of people, but most of the time they're wasteful, right? Or at least inefficient. So you got the stag and you got the inflation, and that's, I think, a potential, bad future for Canada. And stagflation is like the worst problem that the central bank can deal with, by the way. Like, because the solution to growing your GDP is lowering interest rates, but the solution to tackling inflation is raising interest rates. So what are they supposed to do when you have stagflation? They can't lower and they can't raise. So you're just stuck there, and you just try to hold on for dear life and hope it's over at some point. Just hopefully the issue resolves naturally, and hopefully the budget balances themselves, so, which is what Trudeau's plan was. So yeah, that's a potential future. Don't mean to be doom and gloom, but unfortunately that's kind of one potential pathway for Canada, and I feel like that's at this point the most likely pathway. But yeah, anyways, if you guys are ready, let's move on to our final story. This is a quick one. I know we've been going for a while, but let's go through this story and then we can wrap it up. So, after all this election talk, and after the results have come out, a lot of people are understandably dissatisfied on the conservative side as to how the results turned out, right? It's also that the Conservatives were leading in the polls by like 20 points just 6 months ago, and then look where we ended up, right? And by the way, in Alberta and Saskatchewan, the Conservatives were expected to do well there, and they did do well there. So in Alberta, I think there were only 3 seats that went to other parties. 2 of them went to Liberals, and 1 of them went to the NDP. And in Saskatchewan, only 1 seat went to not a non-conservative party, which was the Liberals. But yeah, the Conservatives won almost all this, like over 90% of the seats in Alberta and Saskatchewan. But the Conservatives still lost the election, and there's this sense that Canada's kind of just ruled by what's called the Laurentian elites, right? So the Laurentian elites are the people that live around the St. Lawrence River in Ontario and Quebec. So this person who's from Alberta, Paul Mitchell, posted this kind of in favor of Alberta potentially seceding from Canada's, this message that promotes maybe Alberta one day going their own way. And here's his arguments, right? So he says, when you look at the map, it looks like a conservative supermajority. However, Canada is totally rigged to deliver a Liberal win every time, because Atlantic Canada is overrepresented with seats and bought off with equalization money and Liberal spending programs. And what he's saying with overrepresentation is that like if you actually do the population count versus the amount of seats that they have between Alberta versus Atlantic Canada, Atlantic Canada actually has like 55% more seats than they should have if you do it like on a per person basis. But obviously it's the ridings are not per person. Like there's a lot less people in the maritime provinces who vote overwhelmingly Liberal, by the way. And they kind of have more representation per seat, like per person, than Alberta. So that's what he means by overrepresented. The North, obviously it's like highly overrepresented, but the North, the territories only have 1 seat each, so maybe it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, like again, like if you live in any of the territories, their voting power per person is like magnitudes higher than anyone else in Canada. Quebec, bought off with equalization money and Liberal Ottawa's constant spending. So I think that this is a sentiment that's shared by a lot of Albertans, actually, and a lot of people. That's just like a lot of non-Quebecers in general, right? Montreal, Toronto, Winnipeg, Vancouver's big city socialists and immigrants are bought up with Liberal promises of free stuff. The rest of Canada gets screwed every time, especially Alberta. It's time for Alberta to stop playing a rigged game that is designed to abuse and rob us. It's time to fire Ottawa and free Alberta. It's time to strike out on our own. We owe it to future generations of Albertans to deliver them an independent Alberta, offering prosperity and liberty for all Albertans. Liberal voters made their decision today. They think that they can control everything and everyone. Let's give them a dose of reality by leaving Canada's rigged Liberal clown show as quickly as possible. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, please make it happen. There's no more excuses to stay in a system that does nothing but harms us. So this was actually, I think this came out after Danielle Smith actually made an announcement where she adjusted kind of the thresholds that's needed to have a referendum for Alberta independence. She's lowered it, so now it's easier to get that referendum going if that's what Albertans want to do. So we just so happen to have two resident Albertans on this very show. So I will pass it to either one of you first as to what you guys think of this idea of Albertan independence, right? Can Alberta actually function as a whole, like on their own as a whole? Or do you think that Alberta is still better off being part of Canada? Or, you know, should Alberta join the United States, right? Like, I know that's probably not a popular opinion among the people in this room, but it's a legitimate question, right? I'm seeing more and more Albertans suggest that maybe at least independence is on the table, and maybe some of the more extreme independence people, they even want to join the United States. So what do you guys think of this kind of these arguments that Alberta is being taken advantage of by Ottawa, and maybe Alberta should go its own way?
I'm like, everything's probably going to most likely be surface level, but this is kind of what I think. So to touch on the Lawrence area, like we all know that's probably the most populous area between Windsor all the way to Quebec City. That's where most Canadians live. And if you're going to be talking about like liberal biases and all those type of things, then it's pretty inevitable because there's a lot of core cities there. Core city places tend to be liberal, and therefore there's going to be specific biases. So, and they probably have more power in terms of that. So therefore, their say on like how the Canadian government is going to be run specifically probably is going to be sent out a specific way, if that sort of makes sense, because more people, then obviously they have more control. That's just a theory, that's not 100% true. But in terms of Alberta's overall independence, I think sustainably we would do decently well. I think the circle of people I tend to talk to, maybe 1 out of 3 people have oil and gas jobs or work experiences and stuff like that. And when you hear these salaries, they're pretty wild and insane, and the amount of money that they bring in and stuff. So independent wise, with natural resources, so on and so forth, I think Alberta would do pretty well in terms of tourism too. There's Banff National Park, and then we also have Drumheller too as well. I think as a province in itself, independently, we would do well. In terms of us joining the States, I don't know if I'm for that necessarily, because I don't want to be going to elementary school and having security scanners and like gun shoots every single week. I don't think I'm about that specifically. And on the caveat, like having a powerful dollar would be really nice. But for me, I'm like on a center. Like I think that's a topic of debate for sure. Like I'm in the middle. But in terms of independence, I think Alberta would be pretty okay in terms of that overall. But I personally just want to stay Canadian. That's just my ultimatum. But
I mean, unless you're Benjamin Button, I think that you're not gonna go back to elementary school anytime soon, Dom.
no, for sure. But like so I'm like watching random like TikTok videos, Instagram reel videos or whatever. It's just so different in the States. Like I heard like specifically in Atlanta, if you're walking on the street, people just have like guns and gun holsters and things like that, and then that would be a complete culture shock to me. Like I wouldn't feel comfortable at all walking to, I don't know, like the superstore, and then some like 10 people have guns in their pockets. Like that's just not something I want to endorse in any way. But although I like that USD dollar, but that's about it. So yeah,
I don't think the vast majority of Albertans are interested in separatism per se. I think that there is a big consideration actually towards getting something similar to what the bloc represents, where we can have more power than we deserve by having the threat of separatism. I think that may be more appealing to some people, and I think that, like, from my perspective, like, I don't think that it's fair that the bloc really exists to push for the values of one province over the others, and is able to have so much extra power as a result of it. So from my perspective, like, having an Alberta equivalent would be something that would be good for Alberta. At the end of the day, I really don't think that. I think that in reality, it should probably be more so that the bloc doesn't exist, rather than Alberta needs its own separatist movement so that we can get our own fair treatment. I think the majority of Albertans are not particularly interested in separating for real. I think they're just angry at the treatment of the federal government that we've had for the past 10 years that has been consistently anti oil and gas, which is one of the largest industries here. And yet at the same time, they're extremely happy to take our equalization payments that the Alberta generates. So it feels extremely hypocritical that they are intentionally sabotaging our ability to generate revenue. And yet at the same time, they are sucking us dry of money, basically with no real, like, it just feels like we're being taken advantage of, in Alberta. So I think people are really angry about that factor. That being said,
don't you think that's going to get worse though? Because
it will.
Like Carney's government is not another Liberal government, and all the indications is that he's going to continue or even exacerbate all the Trudeau policies, right?
Yeah.
At least that's the sense that we're getting right now. Again, maybe like we give him the benefit of the doubt. I get it, right? Like maybe he's different, but if he's different, then he hasn't made an indication that he's different. So assuming that he's going to be just Trudeau 2.0, which it looks like he is going to be, you fast forward a year. Well, what do you think is going to happen?
I don't think that Alberta is actually going to try and separate. I think that there may be a larger separatist movement that that pushes the federal government to wake up, because if there's a significant, even like 20% of the population is like, this isn't the worst idea, like in Alberta, I think that would be something that would be potentially waking up the federal government to the fact that, if you keep pushing this, maybe become a real problem. So I think Danielle Smith actually like making it possible or making it easier to get that conversation started. Because again, I do not want to have Alberta separate at all. I think that would be really bad, both for Alberta, because if we separate as an independent, we are definitely going to be consumed by the US or reconsumed back into Canada at some point. Like, there's just no scenario where we're going to act as our own. We would be completely landlocked without getting any of the other provinces to join us, which means that everything would get immensely more complicated. Just if this was now two different countries, particularly when you consider like the fact that the borders are just like right there. Like I can drive to BC and back. I have literally driven to British Columbia on a day trip and back before. So like we are not exactly far away from the border either. So I think it's unlikely that we would actually be separate as an independent, and I think that we would not want to join the US from my perspective, because I like Canada. I don't really want to be American. Like that's just not the like. If I wanted to move to America, I would find a way to move to America, right? Like it's not. Canadians can move to America relatively easily, all things considered, compared to other nationalities. I don't think that it would be for my benefit in the long run to exchange the culture that I prefer, which is the Canadian culture, for the American culture, which is not my preference. Again, I like that being said, like I understand they're very similar. They have a lot of like we're not exactly different in a lot of respects, but the things that we differ on, from my perspective, particularly like as Dom was kind of talking about, like the guns factor, that's just something that I just don't need that in my life, really, is what it comes down to. So if Alberta was actually trying to join the US, I would be leaving Alberta, is kind of my perspective. I don't really think that there's much actual consideration on either of those. I think that it really comes down to I think there's a higher degree of people trying to basically wake the federal folks up to the fact that Alberta's not happy. You have been mistreating us for a long time, and there is something we can do about it. And if the federal government does not work with us, like we have a way to make you hurt. And I think that's really the problem. Like we've tried the carrot of like, look, we can bring so much money to everyone. Wouldn't that be great? And the government has turned its nose up and been like, this carrot is rotten. I don't like it. It's unacceptable. And instead, I think we're moving on to the stick. So we're like, we'll threaten to leave, and hopefully that will result in a better outcome. But again, it's not really ideal either way. I don't think we want to be leaving, and I don't think the Alberta economy would be better off if we left. I think we would be running into a lot of issues unless we manage to gather up BC, Alberta. We don't really need Saskatchewan, but I feel like they just come along anyway. The real one is the water, access to the harbors and the ocean from BC is kind of the most important thing for any trade externally. So I think that would be, I think the only way we would work as a country is if we had BC as well. It wouldn't be able to work as just Alberta on its own, landlocked, surrounded by everything. It would just be too much of a mess. So that's kind of
that's been suggested as well with like what they call Wexit, like West Exit, where it's Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan, like all separating from Canada. So yeah, I don't know, like folks in Vancouver are pretty liberal, so they probably would not go for that. But yeah, I mean that's being tossed out there, where like rural BC is actually fairly conservative. So I think you'll find a lot of alignment between like Albertans and people from rural BC and Saskatchewan as a whole as well. So I don't know, like it just, again, I want to give Mark Carney the benefit of the doubt and think that he's not gonna push it that far into having an actual like unity crisis, but I don't know, right? Because it seems like he's like Trudeau on steroids to me. So if people were already dissatisfied with Trudeau, like people in Alberta, if we get Trudeau on steroids, like it could spiral into something, right? Like I'm not Albertan, so maybe I'm talking like out of line here, but that's just kind of where I see things going. But Sunil, you want to add your thoughts to it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can't speak for Albertans, so like, I really hope that like Canadian unity is like, I hope there's not a problem with Canadian unity, but I do think that it's clearly here. I understand the sentiment Albertans feel. I've always kind of like laughed or rolled my eyes at this idea of Alberta separation, but for the first time in my life, I'm actually understanding the sentiment. I empathize with how they're feeling, because I can see how people are feeling. And Dom just said 1 out of 3 people work in Alberta are working in the oil sector that he meets. Like we have to be more respectful of people. Like we have to we can't we have a portion of the country trying to destroy the jobs of another portion of the country. And I don't agree with everything this Paul Mitchell guy said. Like, for example, what he said about the cities doesn't really make any sense. Like, cities need airports and public transit, and cities need different kinds of services. Like, I'd like you to function as a country without cities, Paul. But other than that, I like the cities aren't looking for free stuff. Cities are the economic growth engines of the country. But whatever, I won't get too much on that one. But yeah, there is definitely an issue in Canada related to like equalization payments. Like Alberta finances Quebec and Nova Scotia. Like 20% of I learned like a factoid that 20% of Nova Scotia's revenue is transfer payments from Alberta. That's insane. Like that's crazy. I don't think that makes any logical sense actually. Like how can a province be okay with 20% of their budget being financed by another province's hard work? And then how can Quebec's entire welfare state be subsidized by the hardworking people of Alberta, and then you just spit in their face the day after the election and say there won't be any pipelines going through? There's no negotiation. You're not even going to talk to these people who are feeding you. It's insane. It's just so disrespectful. And I don't know what to say. I'm not from Alberta, but I feel so much sympathy for them because nobody's listening to them. The country just, half the country just gave them a big middle finger. And I guess my views on this issue at this point is I don't think equalization is a good way to run the country. I understand the motivations behind it, but I don't think it makes much, in theory with equalization payments, a province that's a 30-year, 40-year, 50, 60-year recipient of equalization payments, you would think they would eventually not be a have-not province. You would think they would actually use that huge amount of money they're receiving and actually put it into some kind of productivity projects or actually create jobs for their people, but they don't. So there's clearly something wrong with the system, and maybe Canadians need to be more like Americans. Maybe we have to be okay with the citizens of a province feeling the pain of their leaders, the failures of their leadership. So I think Canada needs a new deal. We need a new way of running this country, and I don't know what the answers are because these problems are constitutional. But Canadian Confederation isn't working when the provinces whose welfare states are subsidized by another province just completely disrespect those. And you're not just disrespecting Daniel Smith, you're disrespecting the citizens of Alberta. They're your fellow citizens. But of course, the leader of the Bloc Québécois doesn't even consider himself Canadian. He doesn't give a shit about people outside of Quebec. So I just think that Canadian unity is at risk right now. It's actually really scary, and I don't want Alberta to separate. Alberta can certainly function on their own. If they made a deal with the United States, they can certainly get their oil to market. It's not ideal for them to be landlocked and not have access to the Canadian oceans, but if they got a deal with the United States, they'd have access to Washington State or whatever ocean they need to. They'd have access to the U.S. market. So if they really needed to do it, they could. So listen carefully. Listen to these people. Listen to the problems there. Listen to what they're saying. They're asking Canada to respect their economic position. And we should respect it. We should listen to them. We shouldn't just places like Ottawa. This is a city of public service. This is a city where people are paid by the taxpayers. Have more respect. When you go to the ballot box, have more respect for the taxpayers that feed you. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that is that it's just ironic that people went to the ballot box for this election with Canadian unity in mind as one of the biggest topics, election topics, right? But the Canadian unity in mind is we got to vote in the Liberals because Trump is a threat to Canadian unity and Canadian sovereignty and all that stuff. But I feel what they achieved was kind of the opposite, right? When they got this Liberal government in, who is by all indications going to continue all these policies that Albertans are mad at, and that's what is hurting Canadian unity. when like Canadian unity was one of the reasons why a lot of liberal voters ended up voting for the Liberals. So it's like the problem that you're trying to tackle actually becomes worse by the solution that you proposed and that you're trying to implement. So it's kind of like a setting up for a Greek tragedy, like like a Shakespearean tragedy. It's kind of like Othello, right? Like or like even Revenge of the Sith. I talked about that at the beginning of this show, where I watched the 20th anniversary theatrical release of Revenge of the Sith, where like Anakin, in an effort to prevent Padme's death, is actually what caused Padme to die and caused all this all this like the downfall and the turmoil and his descent into Darth Vader and all that stuff. So yeah, I just think that like sometimes this stuff, it's like it plays out like a Greek tragedy, and that's where I'm seeing like the trend of the Canada as a whole going, where you're actually trying to, like, by trying to prevent a national unity crisis, you're actually causing a national unity crisis by voting in the Liberals. Let's wrap it up here because we have been going for a long time. And since Dom is back, we have our outro guy again. So let me pass it to Dom.
Wow, yeah, sure. I haven't done this in a while. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel as well as our Clips channel. We do have that channel as well. And with that being said, peace out. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.
See you next week.